topic is towards peaceful elections in Africa amidst COVID-19 challenges. So basically, we are trying to look at the impact of the pandemic on the elections that are ongoing or elections that are yet to be organized. This topic is very, very important because voting or election is a legal issue, it's a constitutional issue, which grants citizens the ability to be able to elect their leaders to lead them within a stipulated period of time. A report conducted last year by the Electoral Institute for Sustainable Democracy in Africa predicted that almost 22 countries in Africa were supposed to hold elections this year. But then due to the pandemic, realized that we see countries like Kenya shifting their elections to next year. I think Ethiopia too has done the same. And even with those that have been able to hold elections, including Burkina Faso, Cote d'Ivoire, we realize that there have been several challenges in terms of voter turnout. So this topic is basically important. We want to identify two outcomes that at the end of our discussion, we should be able to identify solutions to electoral challenges that arise as a result of COVID-19. And we also want to find out ways in which we can safeguard lives, even as we conduct elections. So our speaker for this session is Dr. Vasu. He is the founder and executive director of the Africa Center for Constructive Resolution of Disputes. So Saya, once again, welcome. So we move quickly to our discussions. It's just a 30-minute discussion. So please, we would want you to share your views on our topic, and then we move to our question sessions, please.
Thank you very much, Vera. And I'm very glad that the All Africa have a discussion on this topic because of the importance of elections to democracy and to ensuring that every young person who is of a voting age, 18 in some countries, I suppose it could be different in other countries, are not denied the right to elect their leaders. And elections is a very key part of that and a very key component of ensuring that people are able to exercise their rights. Now, even in a period when there isn't a virus like COVID-19, elections become a very conflictual and a very difficult issue. So if we think of Africa, and many of you may not remember as young people, that Africa had many one-party states. But since 1990, Africa has introduced in almost all countries on the continent multi-party democracy. And a key part of multi-party democracy is competitive elections. And competitive elections don't start on election day. They start with the registration of voters and then with the right of political parties or individuals who want to stand for office having the right to mobilize and to campaign across the country. So I think these are, the components of democracy and elections. Now, what has happened in the COVID-19 era? We all know that, COVID-19 is a virus that is spread by contact of people, and therefore it became necessary in order to save lives to ensure that people were under lockdown or that there were curfews or restrictions on movement. Mm-hmm. And these restrictions on movement impacted in the way political parties could campaign, in the way individuals were standing for office could campaign. It also impacted on election observers coming into a country, because election observers are a key component of ensuring that there are free and fair elections. And these are impartial observers who come from outside the country, either from the region or from the continent or from outside the continent. And their job is to ensure that the elections are conducted in a way that it is deemed free and fair. But COVID-19, with the restrictions on travel, with the quarantines, made it very difficult for observers to enter the country. So that was the second challenge. So the first challenge that COVID-19 brought is the restriction of movement on political parties themselves and individuals who are standing for election. They weren't able to canvass as easily as they could canvass because COVID-19 put restrictions. The second is on observers not being able to come into a country to observe elections and to verify that they were free and fair. So these were, the kind of difficulties that we had with COVID-19. Then additionally, of course, there were governments, some of whom decided that because of COVID-19, because of these restrictions, elections should be postponed. And I think in some cases this was done legitimately because they wanted to ensure that their citizens had free movement, and this could not be done under a COVID environment because we had to save lives. But there were also governments who used this as an excuse to postpone their elections because they felt maybe that they will not be able to garner enough support, or they wanted to extend their term in office. And then there were others who knew that giving the opposition more time to mobilize will actually work to their disadvantage, and so they rushed the elections and got the elections through very quickly. So what has happened with COVID-19, it has created, in some senses, much more challenges and difficulties that has exacerbated conflict and competitive elections, and has placed huge challenges on the democratic process and the right of people to exercise their universal franchise. So these are, I think, where are some of the difficulties. This is a new environment. We don't know, what's right, what's wrong. There isn't a playbook for how you conduct elections in a COVID environment, and a country as large as the United States, which considers itself to be a developed country, we all know now that the huge amount of controversy around the US elections, largely driven and exacerbated by COVID-19, because they had to have in, this post-in ballots, and this was largely because of the COVID environment. So even in a country as developed as the United States, there were huge problems. And similarly in Africa, we had huge problems, but it's a steep learning curve for us. And it's something that will give us enough lessons to ensure that we consolidate the democratic process in the future.
Thank you very much, Dr. Vasu. I'm very grateful that you've been able to outline some of the challenges that have been associated with elections. So I would want to ask, what are some of the strategies that can be put in place to prevent the exploitation of COVID-19 restrictions for partisan gain?
So I think, the first thing is, in the absence of contact campaigning, where you cannot hold rallies and you cannot go door to door to canvass because of these COVID restrictions, then of course the alternate becomes social media, it becomes radio, it becomes television. But when a state is in control of the media and then begins to restrict opposition parties and individuals from the use of the media and shuts down the internet and prevents people from exchanging on social media, then this works to the disadvantage of smaller parties. It also works to the disadvantage of opposition groups and of individuals who are campaigning. So I think we have to be vigilant to ensure that when it comes to an election, that should be vested in the hands of an electoral commission. And the electoral commission
technologies to facilitate elections in Africa without compromising COVID-19 restrictions. Doc, do you think we can use technology in Africa to conduct elections?
I think, Vera,
Yeah, hello, Doc.
if you are you the host now?
Please, yeah, they are doing the corrections at the back for us, please.
Yeah, if you can, maybe if they just remove Kobe, because if they're not able to mute, then it might be easy. Otherwise, the interference will be on there. But it's okay. Don't worry. I understand. You know, the technology, maybe it's beating us now. So what I was saying, Vera, is that, you know, one of the important things we have to think about going forward is that fewer and fewer people globally are voting in elections. And this is probably a sign that, you know, fewer people or more people do not have confidence in governments. And this is why they are not voting. But it is very, very important that people vote or exercise their vote. And therefore, as we move into the future, as more and more people are concentrated in urban areas, but as we have a diffusion of technology across the world, and with new technologies being invented, you as young people need to be thinking about what is the future of elections. How will you ensure that your vote counts? Because your vote is very important. You know, you can't get governments to act in a particular way that meets your interests if you do not vote and you do not exercise the power that you have in the vote. So I think you yourselves will also have to look at new technologies. For example, there is electronic voting today. And electronic voting is done in many parts of the world, in many countries. It is still probably at an early stage in terms of technological development, but I have no doubt that moving into the future, technology will be invented, new protocols will be created that will allow us to vote in different ways, to exercise our democratic right in different ways, and to be able to deal with situations like COVID-19. So I think that, you know, and this is the challenge to young people. Many of you, as I said earlier on in the opening session, are masters of the technology. So you should be thinking both about technological innovation, but about electoral innovation, about voting innovation, about democracy innovation. These are the new things that you need to be thinking about when thinking about how will technology impact on elections. You have to think of it in a much broader context.
Okay, Dr. Vasu, Looking at the challenges that are associated with electronic voting in terms of internet fraud and all that, even looking at the US elections, people contesting that the internet voting by post and by mail, people are contesting it. Looking at a place like Africa that is still a developing country, do you think that Africans can really embrace the electronic voting and then be able to use it effectively as it ought to?
Look, I mean, I think clearly,
Dr. Vasu,
because
please, can
we
you
have
hear
not
me?
yet reached. I can hear you. Can you hear me, Vera?
Okay.
Hi, Vera.
Yes,
Can you hear
please.
me?
Yes, I can. I can hear you.
Okay, so I think, yes, currently we do not have enough bandwidth on the continent, nor are everybody on the continent is not yet connected to the internet. So certainly this is a challenge. But I think increasingly, if we look at the numbers of internet users, Africa's internet users have risen very, very rapidly across the continent. And so we must already be thinking about, innovative ways to ensure that we can reach everybody, to ensure that they can exercise their right to vote. If we look at, M-Pesa, where we are able to, which came out of Kenya, were invented in Africa for the exchange of money. This has allowed people in very remote areas to receive money, to send money. And this is because of an innovation that came out of a necessity to transfer money from one person to another person. In a very similar way, when it comes to the necessity to vote, we have to become creative and innovative. So I think despite the fact that we might not have a pervasive dispersion of technology across our continent, we can still find innovative ways to ensure that we reach as many people as possible across the continent. Technology is the future. Technology will be the future, and electronic voting, for no doubt, will be the way in which we can vote successfully in the future. What we have to do is to make sure that it is secure, that it is equitably distributed, and everybody has a fair opportunity to exercise their vote in a free and fair manner.
Thank you very much, Doc. Please, we want to look at the human rights issues that are involved in elections. We've seen police brutality, we've seen people's rights being trampled upon. So even as we approach elections, what would be your advice to state governments in terms of measures to use to protect human rights?
Well, firstly, since we're talking about technology and elections, I think we have to say that technology has assisted people hugely in ensuring that their human rights are protected and that they are not susceptible to the abuse by security forces, whether that is police or the military, simply because even the police, even the military understand today that with your mobile phone, people can be taking photographs and taking videos and exposing the brutality of not only police and security forces, but even opposition forces and people, who are using violence to advance their interests. This is now, we're in an era where everything is known by everybody. It goes viral. And this fact that, abuse can go viral becomes a huge check on the abuse by anybody. So I think this is a very positive way. But secondly, I think education. People need to be educated about what their rights are. And they need to understand their rights, but also understand their responsibilities. And then lastly, I think governments must ensure that their own people, whether that is their security forces or anybody associated with the government, acts in a way that they respect the rights of others so that human rights are not abused.
Thank you very much. Please, to our audience, in case you have any question you want to ask, kindly post them in the chat room. And we have less than 15 minutes to wrap up our session. So we ask our very last question. It says that what compromises can be made to COVID-19 restrictions to ensure free and fair elections? Should we modify some of the restrictions in order to achieve a peaceful election? Doc, please, what's your perception on that?
I mean, I think, the issue around elections and COVID-19 is how do we ensure that elections can be held? Because elections are, to a large extent, about gathering of people to go person to another person, and therefore, and we know it's spread through the mouth, through the nose, through the eyes, and therefore we are asked to put on our masks, and that covers your mouth and your nose. This is a very basic thing. We know that if you sanitize, you wash your hands, you minimize the spread of the virus. So those who want to canvass, because we know that this is a part of what they want to do, you have to find ways, either canvassing through electronic means, through social media, etc., and we must ensure that governments don't restrict that. Or secondly, if you want to host rallies, then it must be done in large open spaces where social distancing is exercised, and candidates must take responsibility for ensuring that that happens. So these are the compromises. And then on election day, electoral commissions must ensure that there is proper sanitation, proper social distancing, and people have masks if they have to come and vote. If it is not possible to vote in an alternative way, but that you have to vote by in person, then we must exercise all the necessary precautions and put in place all the necessary measures of masks, sanitation, washing of hands, etc. And this will minimize and mitigate the risk of the spread of the virus. Of course, we do know that maybe there are people on election day who have comorbidities, who are elderly people, who might be more susceptible and more vulnerable to the virus, and therefore special arrangements must be made for them to vote, so that nobody should be denied their right to vote on election day.
Okay. Thank you very much. I think so far I haven't seen any of our audience ask a question, but I would like to say that I'm very, very grateful to you for making time to join this session. And to those who just joined us, our topic today was towards peaceful elections in Africa amidst COVID-19 challenges. And then we found out that some of the challenges that are associated with election has to do with restriction of movement and social distancing. And in order to prevent our political parties from exploiting some of the challenges that comes with COVID-19, our speaker suggested that there should be nothing like state capture, in the sense that state social media should be made accessible to all. And we also said something that we cannot do without technology in this age. If I quote him right, he says that technology is the future. So we need to embrace technology, no matter the challenges that might come with them. And in order to promote, to ensure that the COVID-19 protocols are observed, he suggests that the EC has to make sure that on the voting day, sanitization should be ensured. The protocols should be well observed. Thank you very much. Dr. Vasu, please, we are waiting for your closing remarks so that we end the session.
No, thank you very much, Vera. As I said, it's very timely that the All Africa Students Union decides to have a topic around COVID-19 and its impact on elections, because yourselves as young people, you are a huge voting bloc that can influence change in countries, and you should not be denied the right to vote. And so COVID-19 obviously places new challenges on the right to vote. And therefore, I think it was appropriate that you had this topic. We've explored the ideas and looked at alternative ways and compromises that can be made. And as we move forward, there will be a number of lessons that will come out of elections that have already been held under a COVID environment, so that we can improve the environment into the future and ensure that every single person has the right to vote and can exercise that right to vote in a free and equitable manner. So thank you very much to you, Vera, for facilitating this discussion. Thank you to your audience. And again, thank you to the All Africa Students Union. And I wish you all well in this 9th annual conference. Thank you very much and have a good day.
Thank you, sir.